We are going to bring up Neal Sanger to the stage. He's from the Mayo Clinic, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about him while we just switch over our presentation. Neal joins us from the Mayo Clinic, where over the past 18 years, he has served as CIO for Mayo Clinic's community and regional practice, the Mayo Clinic health system across the upper Midwest, as well as running the IT customer organization, which includes the BRM capability. Prior to Mayo, Neal served as vice president for major electronic medical record vendor. He helped launch 2 different startups, started his career with one of the big 4, Anderson Consulting. Neal and Julie have 3 20-something children with no grandchildren yet. Neal is celebrating his 30th anniversary during this trip to Puerto Rico. Let's welcome Neal and celebrate.
All right, thank you for that. Can you all hear me okay? Sometimes in college, people would say, Sanger, it's 11 o'clock, it's time to be quiet. So I just want to make sure that all of you in the back aren't hearing Neal's inside voice. Let me start with a bit of a question, and that is, with a show of hands, how many people would say they're in their dream job? Okay, that's kind of a loaded question, but fortunately, most of your bosses are not here. So you didn't have to feel compelled to say something. But I would say it was more than half, maybe 3/4. And I kind of expected that's what I would see, because I sort of feel that way. And when you look at sort of the things that are really on the roster of what brings me to today in my role, I get to do a lot of things that I really, really like. And I sort of feel like this is what my career has built me for. So what you'll hear today a little bit is that journey in my latest stage of work, as we've worked with Mayo Clinic and we've continued to build our BRM capability. And I've targeted the comments today to help you as an audience member look at the stages we've been through, because when you see that, we've been at this for almost 10 years, you're going to think, how after 10 years, this is kind of scary. How did this not advance faster? How did this go? And so I'm going to tell you a little how that unpacked. But my guess is, in different steps along that journey, I'm going to hit a point where your organization may be, and if there's something you're able to learn from what we did as we pivoted in those moments, that would be my goal. And you'd be able to see that and take that away. I had to start with this picture because if the beginning of the presentation is kind of who defines you, you heard my intro, you saw my corporate bio, but this is who essentially defines what we do. And if you take a look at it on the top, I like to use this little phrase with our team. 4 of those people are here today, and I often call us the LLC of BRM and Associates, because we run a very flat model. There is no middle layer of management here. And I feel like I've got the coolest job because I get to be the coach, and I get to be the person who listens to all of them run their portfolios, almost like a lawyer in their firm. So you'll hear a little bit more about kind of what and how that has come to be and what we do, but it's what made the last several years a lot of fun for me, because we were able to really put together a team of a bunch of people that every single person on this group I got to pick. So that's pretty novel and unique as we built this. So I've broken my comments into sort of 4 different eras. As I built this, Peter Leinsa has worked with us for quite some time. And Peter said, Aaron really digs this industrial revolution thing. So if you weave that in there, you're going to have his attention. So Aaron, what I will tell you is there just wasn't time in 30 minutes to make all of the correlations that could have been made regarding each one of these eras. So it's a little bit soft. I mean, I really haven't unpacked it to the degree that I maybe could have, but it has some relevance in terms of sort of the maturity of our organization. And I won't take any more time on this slide right now, but you'll kind of see as you look through that how it sort of unfolded in my mind as we looked at sort of what we've done. Let me just do a quick, like 60 to 120 second bio of Mayo Clinic. Most of you have maybe heard of the brand, but at the end of the day, we have a CEO who doesn't use the words best practice. He says category of 1, and that's maybe coming across as a little bit arrogant. It's really not intended to be. It's just intended to challenge the organization that some of the things we do, we may not be able to look at things that they're the best of a group. Again, some of you might take that in different ways, but it's actually pretty inspirational for a lot of us because it's a kind of a little bit of a different way of thinking about it. And we get recognized pretty regularly for a lot of our clinical practice. Just some of the basic stats that kind of shape who we are. 17.9 billion annual revenue. That's by no means the biggest. I mean, we got people like Ascension, Banner, Catholic Health Initiative. Well, they've merged with somebody else. There's a lot of organizations that are much, much bigger than we are. So we're probably revenue-wise kind of in the middle, but we're big enough to sort of take on thinking like this in our shared services like IT. We're located in 4 locations. That's going to kind of come into play a little bit in how we've structured BRM. And as an IT group, we've actually got this interesting, I won't call it a dichotomy, but 2 focuses. The upper left-hand point of providing technology to the #1 health system in the world is what you would expect. But our current CEO has really launched what he calls the Mayo Clinic platform, and it's a launch pad for data and analytics. We're in about the 5th year of doing that. In terms of category of 1, our CIO talks to his peers, and they couldn't even quite really imagine figuring out how to do that in their organization. So I think that has created an interesting challenge for us to figure out as BRMs, how do we face those 2 different audiences? A little bit of kind of the stats of our department. We are a virtual IT department. COVID, we were virtual before in those 3 locations, but we became even more virtual because of COVID. So let's jump into sort of these eras. In 2014, there were a number of things going on, but I'll share with you just a few that were sort of shaping what we were doing. We were a bit, just in transparency, we were a little bit of a late to the game implementer of sort of the core engine or chassis of a provider organization, provider being clinical provider, not a provider of IT, but a clinical provider. And when we launched into that, became a really important strategy with technology, if you will. And that's going to come into play a little bit in terms of how our BRM role shaped. But that was something that many organizations had done across their whole institution well ahead of that time. And we were just taking it on. We had a new CIO come in about 2013 or 2012, and he brought in ITIL, BRM being one of the boxes. In the upper right-hand corner, as we were trying to start figuring out, well, let me take the middle one first. Our IT reputation was kind of, it's part of what launched it. IT wasn't really as highly regarded as I would say we are now. And that created obviously a change. Our CIO swapped out. And so we had to do some rebuilding. So we were in a mode where not everybody thought as highly of IT. And that was just one of our challenges. And the bottom box is one around IT convergence. And again, we hadn't combined all of our IT structure. And as we were moving to a common single instance of data for all of the patient record, if you were somewhere inside the doors of Mayo, we decided it was really important that the IT function made that same move. Others had already done it. We were now just doing it. And at the same time we did that, this concept of, but with the feeling of loss that many of these places, and especially those people that I served as the CIO of the Mayo Clinic Health System community practices, how are we going to sort of care for those individuals who administrators said, oh, okay, Rochester's taking over. Everything's going to be about the big house in Rochester. They've got, 5 people that, do what they do in their clinical processes. And, we just take a person and rotate their cap because we're small and this is how we work. And so that was a big deal. How are we going to do that? And the little picture there is a man that his name was Brian Foster. He was one of the regional CIOs, and he coined the term citizenship. And he said, in the midst of still running all of what we're going to do as we bring IT together, we still need a function that stays and is attentive to those regional leaders because they don't want to try to navigate that 3,100 person organization that's now being formed as a part of the central of IT. That in the upper right-hand corner is something we just found briefly, and it was about int CRM, and it was a paper that was written in 2003. I don't know if any of you have ever stumbled across it, but it was the earliest thing I could find when we were trying to figure out what was out there. We hadn't fully gotten our arms around the ITIL placemat of BRM yet. And there was something that was out there, but it was basically saying, take everything that vendors do and figure out how to do it internal. So this was essentially our landscape. We ended up deciding we needed to get sort of each of our regions covered with BRMs. And we didn't do much with all of our central clinical, we call them 3 shields, practice, education, research. We didn't do much with those groups. We essentially left those the job of a manager, and their job as a manager included a hobby called take care of your customer. And so that's kind of how we started in 2014. The key takeaways from this era for us were that we still called it CRM and not BRM, because if you went to the practice at that time and you said, I'm a business relationship manager, they would say, I'm sorry, the revenue cycle office is down the hall. I'm the practice, I'm not the business. Now the world has changed, and you'll see in our previous models now, we use that language of business much more relevant, but in the factor of language matters, as the world of BRM was coming into play in the middle or early part of the last decade, we kept the word C because that was the word that resonated with our business partner. We kept this role, it was migrating from this concept of citizenship because our new CIO at the time said, I don't know what you're doing in the health system, but keep doing it. The phone never rings. The health system has no money, and somehow they don't complain. Yet we've got all kinds of people with all kinds of money over here in Rochester. That was then, not now. And they're all mad and frustrated. They aren't happy with IT. So keep doing what you're doing. So we did that. But the last point here was in terms of customer focus, with all the things that were going on, our first role was a lot of that. Make me feel like I'm not losing focus on the community practice. And it didn't feel a lot about strategy. It felt a lot about execution and almost a little bit like tier 4 support, but not really. But that's kind of how it felt when we first got it going. And that was a little tricky because everyone was trying to figure out, well, how do I equate that to this role of a BRM? So in the end, we really, in this first part of what we did, we also found out that at least by specializing the role, that role was more effective. And we found out that the people over this 5 or 6 years that were trying to do it as a hobby really weren't doing it. And so no shocker to people in this room, but to the people in our organization, that became apparent, and it helped us really think about, well, how do we want to move forward? And you'll see in the next era what we then did to kind of launch that. At the end of the day, my CIO said, I get that you want to be a strategic partner, but at the end of the day, the business needs to feel like IT is providing good service. So he said all of this was relevant. I think there's somebody yesterday said, you're not going to build a strategic relationship plan around how you're going to deliver endpoint. Maybe you do in the beginning because you kind of got to make sure you got the process right. But once you know how to deliver it, you just deliver it. And we want to make sure that it's continuing to be effective. So we came out of that basically saying, we're going to recognize that all the pieces of that ladder are important, and we need to be attentive to some of it. We're going to spend more of attention of our time on others, but we just got to reflect on that. And I had the opportunity to see Eliana on this presentation ahead of time, so I'm not clandestine or anything like that. But I picked up that I thought what would be really important to raise at this point was that there was a lot of stuff we had to do to kind of drive through this stage. And I liked her sort of passion metaphor that applied to a lot of the things we did. So I'm going to keep moving here. The next era was essentially what I'll call rolling out and launching some pilots. We had an engagement with Gartner. All of us know who Gartner is. And Gartner basically said, if you want to roll out a service model, we also had a product model in that conversation too, but if you want to roll out a service model, you need BRMs and SSOs. I'm just going to race through a couple of these points because I could unpack them, but I won't. So that sort of made a bunch of real thinking happen now. BRM was going to sort of make the main stage. It wasn't just going to be about taking care of the geographies. It was, how do we really apply this concept? And we had success in our first years. So let's expand it. Let's start to do some pilots with the departments and specialties, et cetera. The rollout of the EHR project was complete. So now, had we gone back in the day and went to those folks and said, hey, can we work with you on your technology strategy? They'd kind of look at us and go, okay, what about rolling out the Epic EHR? Don't you understand? we don't have any time to think about anything else. That's the core chassis that's got to get rolled out. So now we were kind of coming through that. The third thing that was really more in this place was we were rolling out Agile. And there's been some different opinions and concepts about Agile, but at the end of the day, it was a thing that we applied to our capability maturity program. And I'll unpack that a little bit more. And so now we said, where are some additional targets? And I started getting several more positions that I was able to post that ultimately led to that picture you saw on the previous page. This was kind of Gartner's testimony to basically saying, is this a slide out of all of our decks of the time of what are the things that will help make a service delivery model successful? And so we came out of that with some roles down the middle, and we started piloting in some of our areas. And sorry for the acronyms here. Department of Lab Medicine Pathology is right in the middle. Mayo Collaborative Services is kind of right there in the middle. So you can kind of see a number of the areas we then expanded into. We also launched a maturity initiative, which leveraged Agile and laid out epics that we used to help define different components of our process model and the things that we would do. And that now started to really cause us to think, what are the boxes down the left? I mean, what does it mean to do and be a BRM every day? Because people would come and they start the role, and I don't think they were as simplistic as sort of saying, Neal, can you lay out sort of what the main day-to-day activities are? But at the time we launched these pilots into these areas, I had to sort of say to them, we've been building this model, but from an operational standpoint, we don't have sort of some of the key building blocks in place that we think we need to work every day. And now we were creating some scale. We had more people, and all of a sudden the value of doing some things consistently. So when everybody looked to the work that BRM was doing, they could see consistent templates, consistent formats, and we could create some consistent ways of working. We didn't have that. And for the most part, we were sort of all Western frontier, wild and free. We just didn't have that in place. So this created sort of this demand that we figure out how to do that. I commented a little bit about the first point. Turns out that because of the receptivity of BRMs during this time, we got a lot of positive feedback, and we continued to build momentum because we started picking out ones that we knew would be good places to plant more BRMs. And I wouldn't have time to completely unpack this, but if you remember back to my intro in bio, I did 2 startups with others. And if you think about what happens in the world of venture capital, we got an influx of funding. And with that funding, we went and did it and delivered well enough that everybody said, okay, we're going to keep going more. So that'll take us into the next era. But just to think about the expansion of BRM, what was a little bit flawed about the focus of those ones we targeted was we basically aimed at who was the most demanding. And in reality, we didn't aim at where was the greatest opportunity to gain value from IT. And of course, that's what we talk all about now. But if I'm back in the 2001, I'm thinking about my colleagues who were thinking of BRM as a little more of a defensive move than an offensive move. And they were really more about, okay, if they're really having a hard time, how do we respond to that? And a lot of that fits under that order taker mentality. Now that's considered a swear word at Mayo, and it's actually kind of unilaterally accepted across a lot of environments and a lot of topics, but that wasn't the case in 2021. So that was another really kind of key takeaway. The other thing that was really important was we basically said in the position and role value proposition, it's not that we couldn't have a person who is in a role and delivering something do BRM stuff. But what we found was when we made them a position, they had the time. If they didn't have the skills, they were developing the skills. They had the interest. This was the kind of thing they wanted to do every day. And ultimately, at the end of the day, they would then use all of those to build knowledge so that they could actually be an effective aggregator of technology strategy and figure out how to build kind of linkages from the business needs that our business partners were describing to the technology capabilities that we could offer. And so that's kind of the underpinning of essentially a lot of how I talk to my IT colleagues, because they can come to me and say, well, we don't need a BRM to do that. And I say, well, you don't need it. But what you don't have is, if you don't dedicate enough focus on it, you don't really do a good job of pieces of it. And frankly, the other delivery job probably suffers. So anyway, that was kind of a key takeaway from this era. And this is where we figured out it was more than just about time, because those skills, interests, and knowledge started coming into play. Peter, I thought, did a really nice presentation yesterday about the 6 dials that a pilot has to run what they do. And we were in the process of building some of that. We still are. And now you'll see that as we roll into our next era. So this is the point where I'm going to kind of sort of step on the gas, because you're going to see me kind of run through a bunch of slides. But when we started running that agile practice maturity work, we're on increment 17 right now. So we've been doing it for 3 years. And again, you might say, really? Gosh. But the reality is what we did was we basically said, that's our way of sort of dividing and conquering the work that BRM we want to build in our practice. We didn't find it in other places to be able to sort of beg, borrow, and steal it, using my old consultant credo. So in the end of the day, we were building it. And at that point, we sort of said, how are we going to best do this? And so I'll talk about a little bit of kind of what we did as a takeaway, but that became a lot of our focus as we were continuing to just expand and care for our business partners. This concept of allyship became a really big deal to our CEO. And it was his word, of which sort of fit just right, because he said, I need BRM, or I need IT, not BRM, said, I need IT to be an ally to the business. And I've heard one of our radiology chairs of technology go, does that mean we're going to war together? And no, of course not. But he got it. He's just having fun. And that became sort of a great underpinning, because now all of a sudden, allyship became sort of the language and the brand at Mayo Clinic to say, absolutely, BRM wants to help be an ally to the business. That's meaningful. Those words mean something to our CEO. We'll jump on that. We'll take advantage of that. BRM practices, I've talked a bit about that. We continue to really expand those, and several of my next slides, I'm going to go pretty quickly, and you'll see a bunch of stuff we built. We've also launched something we've called a Voice of the Customer 2.0. I won't tell you what 1.0 was, but in 2.0, I said, I'm going to take a role that's broader than just BRM for my boss, and I'm going to do a checkpoint, an objective checkpoint with all of our 50 business partners, 50 or so business partners, half of which we cover with a BRM, half of which we still cover with people doing it as a part of their, other day job. And we want to do a little bit of a checkpoint on how we're doing it. I'm going to share a little bit about that. And then this became the point where we literally said, we got to get this wrapped around some sort of essentially a capability framework, because we would be talking about things, and sometimes they overlapped and sometimes they didn't. And we couldn't frankly figure out if this was a scope of this epic or of that epic. And so we had to get some organization to our thinking. This is where we really then expanded our footprint. I got another 6 or 7 or 8 positions. I can't remember the numbers, but you can see in the middle what we sort of rolled them out. Much more in number than what you see here, but we covered a couple of them, other clinical areas with the same BRM. And so this is a large picture of what we have today. And that's now coming back to sort of my picture. You can see these are all the individuals that cover those different areas. And people like the Department of Medicine, BRM, she has 6 or 7 clinical divisions in that area, but they all lump under the Department of Medicine. So that's caused us to be able to cover, basically a number of areas. This is a little bit of our, secret sauce. You can take a picture of it, and if you're not fast enough, I'll sell it to you for $50,000. Oops, sorry. No. Okay, let's go back. So this is what we built, just for the fact that we had to get our heads around this. And so it was all built on the fact that if you went back to that Gartner model, basically we said, okay, where's BRM in this construct of the products and services that IT provides? And I'd try to put BRM here and everybody go, well, no, okay, BRM's a bar. And so BRM came this bar down the middle of the page. And I said, okay, we got to figure out a better way to represent that. And what we've done is our best efforts you see the pillars, the 4 pillars of BRM kind of structured in the middle there. I'll unpack this just a little bit more in a couple more slides, but you'll see we've spent most of our effort kind of aggregating most of our thinking up in sort of that reporting and communication layer and the cultivating relationships pillar. That's where we've spent most of our time in our agile maturity efforts. But we're kind of working our way into the others. More to come in just a moment. This is something we call our snapshot. And our snapshot is essentially on a page of what's going on in our business partner. And although that sounds really simplistic, it became a big move for us. And you know where it came from? It came from one of our BRMs that said, I got to put something together because my business partner wants to see kind of everything that's going on in their world from a technology standpoint. And so, gosh, how do I do that? And so this actually had a different format, and it reshaped itself a little bit into 3 columns. But this became one of our artifacts that very quickly we could embrace across our BRM team. You'll see this note down the left-hand side, these little boxes that say AO asterisk. And that's an ally opportunity. And we called it an opportunity because we decided that ally was really in the eyes of the beholder. Every business's definition of what an ally is could be at a service provider level, could be at a trusted advisor level, service provider, trusted advisor. So we said, doesn't matter. If that's really valuable to them, then let's flag it. And we've created a dashboard. This has just come together here in Q3 regarding, if you just, and it's very manual today, because we just don't have another way to do it. But we abstract that, and now we just can tweak it and update it, because what's an ally opportunity is going to probably stay a top of mind thing. So this doesn't change a ton, but we can see now a picture of what are the most important things to all of our business areas kind of in a common place. And this list it's approaching 100 items, but how can it not be? I mean, when you've got a whole 50 some customers, business partners, and you've got 2, 3, 4 items. In this case, you see all those items that were flagged are under the Department of Medicine, kind of right in the middle here. So she has 9 divisions. So she's kind of picked out a few of the key ones, but this gives us a bit of a picture of sort of what we've got. We're just starting to try to work on this, but this will probably be customized by business partner, so that you can literally say on a life cycle basis, what is our behavior with them on an annual cycle? That's how they budget. It's how we have kind of worked with them to know where we engage, what we do. And so we're still just kind of trying to figure out how we do this. But that's something that we want to have in place so it's very clear how we engage. We have a pretty nice web page. I got to tell you, I've been like probably most of us in this room. You create a web page, all of a sudden you look. The last time it got updated was like 9 months ago, and everybody says that's not accurate anymore. That's not true anymore. Shoot, we need to update that thing. So I have somebody who does a really nice job of it, and she's phenomenal. And she's been working with us to help write what our IT strategy called our plays. And these were the ways that we would work with our business partner and how we work with IT as IT delivery to collaborate to deliver things. So these plays, if you click one of them, it's about 1.5 pages to 2 pages long. It's meant to be not a how-to guide, but just literally what are the sequence of activities generally that happen. And so we're getting some pretty positive feedback on this, because it's shaping and it's at least just writing down what we know. This one and the next couple of slides are really, really important, because this is where we finally said we need to define what is a strategic relationship plan. So you see we got 4 main headers. The first one is basically who's the business partner. The second one, which I always thought was kind of a mouthful, but we said, all right, it's what BRMI uses, BRM Institute uses, so we'll keep it. It's called Operational Approach to Business Partnering. I might have called that more of a stakeholder matrix, but I actually kind of like Operational Approach to Business Partnering, because it really talks about who are the people and how do we engage with them. So those are the first 2 sections. Then we've got a business capability technology roadmap. Okay, with all that going on, what are the things we're doing with you in the next 1 to 5 years? Depends on how deep we go with that. And then we've got a document in there called the business value forecast. And you'll see a couple of things down the bottom that also play in. This is the core, 1 through 4, the core of this document. Our gentleman that runs our neurology department is here today, so I'm going to embarrass him because this is his multi-year plan that he built. He built this with the business partner because we always say he kind of got the privilege of sort of starting from scratch with a business partner that said, we wish we were cardiology. They got everything. They know what they want. They got a multi-year plan. How do we get one of those? And so our BRM BRD that's here today helped us build this with them. So they built that plan. And then this is a lot to try to unpack, but literally what we've got in here is he laid out with them on a couple of those initiatives that are on that previous plan. What do we get? Why are we doing it? So pretty proud of the work he and others have done in this space of putting numbers to technology. And what I didn't take time to do is I had one more slide that I used. And that's a teaser to go back to the how to sell and how to define the value and impact of BRM. The next slide basically merged this with that slide called the time, the skills, the desire, and the knowledge to talk about what did he do? What was his role in each of these items? But I'm not really allowed to do that today. So anyway, you can see a bit of the artifacts that we've got going on. We've also got this thing that's kind of like if you were a business, it'd be called your annual report. And so we've done this thing where we're going to do a look back and a look forward. We're just doing that right now. So as we come into the end of the year, every BRM on our team is building this for their business partner. A couple are going to have to build maybe more than one because of the way their business partners shape. But we're going to lay this out because this is what happened in the last 12 months with technology and how do we do? Some of it we maybe didn't get done and it's going to carry over into the next year. But that becomes the foundation for laying out even things that maybe need to be updated in our SRP. The opening of that, I'm just unpacking it a little bit here, of that annual update sort of lays out things according to the business partner's strategy. So the bottom picture here happens to be hospital operations. They've organized the work that they need to get done as a department into 4 strategic focus areas. So that BRM is laying out what we've done in each of those 4 areas. And that's really, really, really powerful the way this has been laid out. And the people and culture, here's what you can see. They said, here's the things that we accomplished in 2024. Here's what we did together, our collaborative efforts. So we're trying to build this not as this is an order you place from us and here's what we gave you. This is an effort to try to reshape some of that thinking. So it's how are we working together to deliver you technology? And then what were some of the challenges? And then what are our goals for 2025? So that was a bit of a shot through a whole bunch of the last era as we've been coming into 2024. But, if we think about some takeaways here, we've figured out that there's a bunch of work that if we want to really be good at this, we've got to lay out our operational practices of BRM. And we've had some help from Peter. We've had some help from the BRM Institute Book of Knowledge, and then we've kind of fitted all that together with the work that we've wanted to do as well. So, so the other things that we've learned is that, as you can probably imagine, and you, I'm sure, see this in your own organizations, there's practices, and then there's standards, and then there's guidelines. That snapshots become a standard. But how you use each box, there's some guidelines for how to do it, but it always looks that way. But we've got a number of guidelines as well so that the BRMs have some flexibility to use these tools as they best work. What we figured out is that I've kind of shared with the team, and this came out of my world of being a consultant. Consulting is terrible at harvesting best practices. It used to be that you'd run around and saying, well, shoot me an email of that. I gotta make a presentation tomorrow, and I love your slides. And so now, with the help of that nice web person I told you about, we've got a pretty good stack where each BRM's got their own SharePoint page and section on our tool. And they've got the things that they've done to support their bit, but then we've got some standard ways of working that are coming out of that. So that's a day a week. we've said to people, you got to think about your job as a BRM as a day a week of bringing it back. And that supports our agile sprints, our every other Wednesday are our ceremonies, our PI planning events, et cetera. So that's what we've learned. We really, has made that mostly successful. We're still saying BRM in a role can be appropriate with certain areas. In a perfect world, I'd love about 6 or 8 more FTEs to just round out the whole rest of it, but I kind of got to make a case for it, and to make a case for public affairs is pretty tough. You know, if I sweep them together with about 3 or 4 other shared services like legal and everything else, yeah, I mean, we may get there, but at least as we stand today, we sort of left some of those in place. And the other thing is that, you know, one of the best formulas for success, and I suspect many or most of you do this, was the fact that we partner with the business when we recruit the role. And it's kind of amazing, the different interests that the business has when we go put a role in place maybe surprises me a little bit. But at the end of the day, what's great is they are totally bought in on the person we just hired. And so now we got a ton of tailwind, even if they're learning, even if they're coming up to speed with some things, man, they love their BRM because they thought that was the best pick we could make out of the team. And so that's been a big tailwind for us and why we've had some pretty good success that way. So now I'm going to move really pretty quickly. As we go into 2025, I don't know if, I think I've seen some things call it the conceptual age. Aaron is probably much more sophisticated in thinking about what the next era is. But for BRM excellence, we are in the process of supporting numbers of $4 to $5 billion expansion of sort of revamping our whole Rochester environment. This is a picture of what it will look like when it's completed in, I think, around 2030. Construction has begun. And so it's all about reconstructing the way we care for patients, et cetera. It's tons of technology, not just in the core transaction processing systems, but right down to when you check in, when you're coming to town, we've got a parking spot already reserved for you, and somebody's going to meet you at the parking spot with a wheelchair and the whole bit. I mean, it's just kind of makes me get goosebumps thinking about what we're planning for that whole era. And we have to support it. IT has to support it. Those 3 pillars we haven't really unpacked yet. So this is a journey yet on our road, on our placemat of methodology. And if you started reading those boxes, it is a lot of the stuff we talked about here, but it's sort of like we sort of got the meat and potatoes of what do we do every day done, because we felt like we had to, but there's more to come in those boxes. I've mentioned briefly this voice of the customer, where we run kind of a cycle on doing this. The process on the right is not rocket science. It's just what most of these customer surveys do, but it's gained us a lot of positive and favorable testimony with our business. It's about all of IT. It's not just about BRM. That allowed me to open up and have a very general ask of the 4 questions down below, but it also just has given us an opportunity to, quite frankly, let those business areas speak up to the things that they're very happy about. And you can kind of see comments on the right that are coming about as a result of that. I'm just about ready to land here, but I wanted to share with you, just because I'm pretty proud of this. This is the result of our employee survey, and I run a couple of teams, but BRM happens to sit in obviously one of my areas. And if you look at the strip across the bottom that's almost all green, I get to proudly show this slide every time we want to talk about these things. So they're a good group, and some of it probably comes back to my opening question, is I think a lot of them think they're sort of in their dream job. And so that makes it a lot of fun for them, makes it a lot of fun for me. So I think, you know, let me land here a bit. We've just really continued to see the high value of BRM collaboration. The measures and the metrics that we're starting to develop are gaining speed, but we've got more work to do in that space. At the end of the day, I thought, as I looked at Jen's slides, and I applied it to what we're doing at Mayo Clinic, BRM continues to elevate at Mayo Clinic. I think there's really a lot of great seizing of the opportunity amongst our BRMs. They love to sort of be passionate in conversations about, gosh, this is why we're here. This is what we do. So that's one of the main ways that I get to appreciate them every day. And for those of you that sat in the nursing presentation, I asked Andrew if I could shamelessly steal a testimony from his business partner because it's super powerful. So let's go ahead and roll this a couple minutes and I'll land.
Hello, I'm Rhiannon Frederick, and I'm the Chief Nursing Officer for Mayo Clinic. Our Department of Nursing is just over 24,000 team members strong, and we have a bold, transformative culture who's working to push the boundaries on what's possible with nursing practice and care delivery. As you can likely imagine, none of that would be possible within nursing without the strong operational and strategic partners at our side to figure out how to make that happen. One of the most important partners over the last several years has been our IT colleagues. Andrew joined our team in 2022, specifically as our dedicated business relationship director. Andrew has done amazing at taking our nursing strategic plan with clear priorities and tactics, working to translate that across IT and ensure we have the right IT partners at our side, helping discover what's possible. I have to tell you, we have more IT partnerships than ever before. And because of that, our progress has really accelerated. They're helping us understand what the infrastructure is that we need to have in place in order to accelerate our progress. They also help us understand what technology is available that we haven't capitalized and what we should be considering for the future. We work side by side in order to transform practice together. And it's really that partnership that's been the secret to our success. We've accomplished many great things, like virtual care in many different modalities, ambient documentation solutions specifically for inpatient care, which is going to transform the way nurses deliver care. We also have smartphone communication and documentation to ease some of the burden that nurses face with documentation. In addition, we're using AI in a variety of forms, but specifically looking at predictive staffing and scheduling modalities to take some of that burden away from staff. IT has been essential at helping us figure out how we can use technology to supplement the great work that nurses do in the best way possible. None of this could have happened without the great engagement and dedication from our IT teams, and specifically Andrew, helping them be aligned with where we're going and helping us know who to connect with in the team. I look forward to continuing to grow that partnership with IT as we continue to accelerate our progress to transform nursing care and patient care across Mayo Clinic. Thank you.
Gives me goosebumps. I've seen that about 4 times now. Andrew's kind of in the middle of the room. I'm going to call him out. I can see the red glowing on his face right now, but doggone it, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. So with that, let me bring my comments to a close. I'll turn it back to Tom or team here. And thanks for the opportunity to share what we're doing at Mayo Clinic.
Neal, I'm not trying to be on my phone during your presentation, but I'm like aggressively texting my coworker Amber back and forth. We got to do this. We got to do that. We got to do the BRM capability maturity roadmap, and particularly the business partner engagement lifecycle. So a lot of great takeaways. Thank you so much, Neal. Let's give it up. We got to put some of this stuff in place. This is a lot of takeaways. So a lot of great takeaways in Neal's presentation. Like I reminded you guys yesterday, in the online campus, if you're a member, you can access all of these slides from all of the presenters. So if you couldn't write fast enough, like me and my friend Amber couldn't, they will all be available to you in the online campus. Also, do on your way out, take the worksheets on your desk with the passion framework that Eliana gave us. And if you want more for your team, she's got a box of them right there. I think she'll give you as many as you want. Also in the app, I want to call out that in the organizer announcements, we have posted a survey. That survey is anonymous, and we would love to hear from you, just your thoughts on the conference. Feedback is a gift. Anything you could share with us helps us get better every year. So please do share today, tomorrow, anytime. We'd love to hear from you. Is there a timeline that we would ask from soon? Soon, like don't wait for while it's fresh. Plane ride home. There we go. All right. Finally, breakouts start at 9:45. So we want to get you guys out of here. Same format as yesterday. The rooms go 4, 3, 2, 1, so it's all right here. And really, we just want you back in this room for our main general session at 4:15 for Kimball Lovin and our conference closing. So go have a fantastic day.